The Midnight is my favorite band, and so by the end of this tutorial, you're going to be able to create music that sounds like it was produced by The Midnight, including a track that sounds something like this. Oh, 'cause you buried a platypus.
Is midnight.
All right, so how did I create this track? Well, let's start with the bass here. The bass. And it's pretty straightforward. I just have 2 tracks doing the same thing here. So let's look at the pattern first. Pretty simple. You got the 8th notes here hitting, and it's just 3 chords basically. And it just repeats the whole way through the whole song. So this is, I guess, more so maybe vintage Midnight. A lot of times they just kept the same chords and the same beat, the same kind of bass pattern all the way through. Obviously you can mix this up, but here's just one way you can kind of get away with creating some really great synthwave and not having to make things too complicated. And so we can hear this now. We'll just solo the bass. And then it's filtered here in the intro, where there's high frequencies in the chorus. And so for this sound, I'm actually using this bass here, Explorers, from Synth Control's free Midnight SERUM preset pack. He actually has 2 of these. These are really awesome. You can see all the different sounds in here. And so if you want to grab these for free, just go to orpheusaudioacademy.com/midnight. I'll also have this linked in the description below. And not only will you get these 2 awesome free SERUM preset packs full of awesome Midnight sounds, but you'll also get my free Synthwave sample pack, which has a whole bunch of awesome Synthwave drum and effects samples. So lots of goodies for you in the description, or go to orpheusaudioacademy.com/midnight. I'm using the, what bass am I using here? Bass Explorers. So I don't know why it says Fire in the Sky. It's checked here, but this says Explorers up here. So this is meant to mimic the bass sound that the Midnight uses in their song Explorers. So if we solo this, that's a nice clicky bass sound there. And what I'm not sure if I tweaked this. I may have tweaked the envelope a little bit. I'm not sure. Maybe the filter a little bit. I just got some compression on here. And you're hearing some hiss. That's from my my bus. I'm just going to turn off my tape there just so that's not annoying. And we can hear things a little better. So here we go. So you can hear that compression's kind of bringing up some of those quiet parts a little bit. Then we got just some EQ here, bringing those higher frequencies out and then just low cutting the part we don't need. All right. And then finally, I'm adding some Tal chorus. This is really big for really making a cool synthwave 80s style sounding bass. So that makes it nice and wide. And then I'm layering this with another bass here. This is the bass Vampires from Synth Control's Midnight preset pack here. I think this is off. This is saying Explorers 1. So maybe it's Explorers 1 key. No, it's definitely not a key. It's definitely the bass. So this is like off by 1. I'm not sure why it's glitching like that. So this is the bass Vampires. So it's just a little darker sounding. And then I've just got some EQ on here. And I'm trying to use retro or more vintage plugins, since that's what they had in the 80s. So if you want more of a retro sound, try to use plugins that are modeled off of analog equipment. And then on my bass bus here, I'm adding some saturation here. This is actually a free plugin. I really like this on bass, the Szechuan Saturator. So let me turn off all these. You can hear what this sounds like without and then with it in. Just makes it a little grittier, a little warmer. And then I've got some vintage EQ here. By the way, the VEQ3 by the Midnight is one of their favorite plugins. And I've seen them use this a lot in their tutorials. So right now we're just boosting at 220 just by 1.5 dB. and then just again compensating there, and then also high passing up to 50. So we're really cutting off those super low ends, because you didn't really have that so much in 80s music. And then I'm turning analog on. Pretty much all these plugins I'm turning on the analog and the grit, just adding some dirty retro sound to all these different tracks, because when you're working in the box and digital synths and all digital sounds, it's going to sound maybe a little bit too sterile. So adding all this grime and saturation is going to help it sound a lot more vintage and retro. And then I had the Studio Rack tool here. This is just a plugin that lets you like combine different plugins. So I've got like one knob filter, so that I can filter this. You can see the filter going on here. And then I have Smack Attack on here. So I can adjust the attack and the sustain of this overall. And then I've just got a high pass here. So if you look at the macros here, so if I want to increase the sustain or the attack, and then I'm also automating the low cut here, instead of just having a huge rack of plugins here, I just kind of put them into one rack here with Studio Rack. By the way, I did a full tutorial on Studio Rack. You can check that out in the description below. So we'll hear what this is doing. So I'm kind of boosting the attack a bit. That's pretty cool, and that might be something even you could potentially automate, over time. Maybe your verses, you have less sustain, and then as it increases in energy to your choruses, you increase that sustain. And then of course I'm also automating the high cut and the low cut, but I'll cover that a little bit later. And then lastly, I just have this TDR Nova on here, just doing some multi-band compression and EQ. So I'm kind of trying to tame and control those low mids. But then also trying to boost between 1 and 2K so we can kind of have it cut through the dense mix, adding a little bit of a high shelf. So that is the bass, and then like I said, it's just the same pattern all the way through the whole thing. Pretty simple. So then we'll move on to our drums here, and so we'll start with the kick. And like I said, all these drum samples, you can find them in my free Synthwave sample pack. Grab that in the description below, or go to orpheusaudioacademy.com/midnight. And so we got the kick here, and let's go ahead and solo this. We're going to turn everything off. What do I have gain here? I'll leave that gain on. So pretty simple. Have the kick hitting on the 1 and the 3. Simple, and the snare hits in between. I'll show you in a second. And then I've got this little EQ here, kind of trying to carve out where the snare body would kind of be. Kind of where some boxiness might be on the kick. And also kind of removing some of the clickiness up here, but also kind of increasing the air again to help it cut through. And we got some British channel here, adding some more EQ, kind of boosting that low end here, boosting the high a little bit at 3.7K, adding a little bit of saturation here with the input, and then adding some compression as well. So kind of doing like 1 to 2 dB of compression, so very faint. And so again, if you don't have any of these plugins, you can totally like recreate this, right? Just grab an EQ. I'm using like a channel EQ, channel saturation. So you could do this in Logic if you went to like EQ, Vintage EQ Collection, Vintage Console EQ. So if you want to get like the drive of this, you would just turn the drive up here. And then here's where your EQ is that I'm using. And then you just throw on some compression. And then I wanted to be a little fatter, so I just threw on some 1 knob fatter here. Just add some quick fatness. Then I added some Super VHS, one of my favorite plugins for Synthwave by Baby Audio here. And you can get 10% off all Baby Audio plugins when you use my code, I believe, OAA at checkout. I have that in the description below. So this is really cool because you can add some more saturation, which I'm doing here with heat. And then I've got a tape machine on here. So I'm using the T-Rax Tape Machine 99 by IK Multimedia, just to add some tape warmth. Add some warmth, and it kind of, I don't know, it feels like it smooths it out a little bit. And so this is really nice here. Any kind of like tape saturation is good to add on your kick. Snares here. So I got two different snares. So I'm using this high snare here. And then add some vintage EQ here. Boosting a little bit at 10, get that brightness, and then cutting at about 7K by about 0.5 dB just to get rid of some of that harshness. And then I'm adding a bit crusher here, very subtle here just to help it cut through a little bit. It actually kind of fattens it up a bit and also adds some of that bright end on the top there. And then last thing is an enveloper to remove some of the sustain. Yeah, we're cutting out some of that sustain there. So just removing that tail a little bit. And that's just the enveloper tool here inside of Logic. So any kind of plugin you have that can control like attack and sustain, you can use that. Then I have snare 2 here. I've just got an EQ here. I was cutting the highs and the lows on some of the mids there. So this kind of gives the body. And this sample already has kind of some reverb on it. So together you get the nice snappy attack with the top one and then the nice big body with the second snare there. And then on the bus here, we got some Nova again. This is a free plugin, really cool. Multi-band EQ and compressor. And so we're just taming some of the harsh frequencies here. We're not doing any cutting, it looks like, but we're adding some compression here. And then we're boosting a little bit here, around 10K. And we're doing a little bit of compressing as well, just a tiny bit. And then just cutting off the highs there that we don't need. And we got some more EQ here. I guess that was just a little too muddy. I'm going to give a tiny bit of punch and a little bit too harsh as well. So I cut a little bit up there. Together without these in and with them in. So definitely you can hear it really controls the snare better, not as harsh, just a lot more controlled. And then we sent this to a bus 3, where I've got some space designer here, just a big plate on here. You can kind of see the settings here. So this is where you kind of would want to put your gated reverb. This isn't technically gated, but the way space designer kind of really cuts off the tail here, it's almost acting like a gate. And then it's a pretty short length, so we can hear what this sounds like. So you can hear it really falls off at the end there. And then I got a little bit of EQ on this. I'm just cutting some of those highs. And then roll at the low end. So this is an EQ on the reverb bus. And then I've got another bus here, sending it to this chroma verb, which is like a room reverb. So I'm kind of just applying a room reverb to the snare as well. So if we turn off the big one, okay, I just like a bright crispiness. That's nice. And so with the other reverb. Not bad. Right. And so, all right, you might want to tweak this a little because it sounds a little bit artificial, but you're not going to really notice it in the mix, but you can like mess around with the length here. That might sound a little bit more natural, but obviously you got to hear it in the context of the whole mix to really know what's going on there. And then we got these hi-hats going on. Just found a couple of samples. And so I just put the sample in twice, and then the second one I just turned down the gain. So it sounds a little bit more realistic, like you're playing it, like one hit is louder and the other one's quieter. And the same thing with this hat. Pretty straightforward. And then the second hat here, we're sending this to that same room verb. And then we got these claps here. Pretty simple clap sample, just got some of the same bit crusher on it that I had on the snare. And then again, we're sending it to this chroma room verbs. We're kind of sending all our drums to. So without it in, pretty dry. So it has a nice bright splash. And then we got this fatter clap up here. Again, all these samples are in my free sample pack. And here I added some tube compression. I just used this drum smash preset and then adjusted, I believe, the output here because it was like really boosting that. So we can hear what this does. Not bad. Kind of really pulls up the tail there so you can see with the slower attack that's grabbing that tail and pulling it up. Then we're adding some low pass EQ here. Make it a little darker. It's not quite as bright and brittle. And I do have a crash here. It's kind of more of an effect, transition effect. And I don't have anything on there. It's just a sample. Oh wait, we got toms down here. Some samples, some tom samples from my pack. I have this EQ on here. So we're really kind of cutting out the lows and just kind of keeping those high bright parts so it can really punch through the mix. Nice. And then we got some space designer in here again. I think I chose like a big plate or something originally. This is a preset I made. So really big reverbs. Obviously you can tame that and adjust that to your preferences. And then lastly, I add some tube saturation here to kind of excite it more and warm it up a bit. So it kind of thickens up the reverb there. And again, you don't have to use, if you don't have waves, you can use any kind of like tube saturation, like vintage tube EQ here in Logic. So I could just pull the drive up here and not use the EQ. And then we got the drum bus here. So I'm using Studio Rec here to control a couple different parameters from a couple different waves plugins, one on filter and smack attack. So I can control the attack and sustain here. So this is what the smack attack, I just got these macros mapped just for a little easier control in here. And so I'm reducing the attack a bit and increasing the sustain a bit on these drums. So we'll hear what this sounds like. It's very subtle. Then I'm adding some tape saturation to the whole kit. I'm using another tape machine by IK Multimedia here. The tape machine 24. And we're increasing the high frequency EQ here and the low frequency here. Then we got some vintage EQ here, boosting at 12K here by about half a dB, and then cutting at 3.8 to remove some of that harshness by quite a bit here. Drums are starting to sound a lot more glued together now, but this is really going to help here. The bus compressor by IK Multimedia that I'm using here. Waves also has a good one, the SSL. That's what this is based on. And so this is just going to help glue the drums together here. So very, very, very subtle there, but you can hear it kind of pulls everything together, pulls it forward a little bit. And then we're adding Finally, some parallel aggressor here. It's another baby audio tool. So we're adding some parallel compression and some parallel saturation here. So this is where you can control the parallel compression. This is where you can control the level of the parallel saturation. So this is how much you want to dial in. And this is then the amount of it. So like how much heat and how parallel it is. If that makes sense. So turning on, putting a high pass on here so that we're not messing up that low end. So you can hear it really thickens up the drums and makes them a bit more punchy, which is a really nice effect there. So I got some really nice punchy drums, and so we can compare those alongside the bass we have going on. And now we have a good synthwave track going on here. And if you want to, right, you could add a filter or a pumper or like sidechain compression to the bass if you want it to be a little bit more bouncy and groovy. But I'm going to keep it very, very subtle here. Just to add a little bit more movement. And so that's it for our drums and bass. So now let's look at our synths. A synth here that Midnight likes to use, and you can do this as well, is instead of using like a pad, I mean, you can use pads, Midnight does use pads, but you can just have like one kind of motor synth that kind of carries through the whole track. That's kind of an ARP, kind of a pad on one. So very simple, just kind of played it on my keyboard, just kind of bouncing back and forth between a couple notes and then just going down the scale. So we'll go ahead and turn off all these effects that I have on here, and we'll hear that what it sounds like without these on. Not bad. It's a pretty good sound here. It's the key Prom Night here from Synth Control's free Midnight SERUM preset pack. So you can see right in here, Prom Night is what I'm using. And so this is a really cool sound. And then I added some vintage EQ to this. So boosting above 12K here and cutting kind of those muddy low mids. And then also high passing up to 300. So really cutting out those lows that we don't need. So already it sounds a whole lot better. I got a filter on here because the filter's opening and closing over time, which I'll cover later. Then some more EQ carving here because there were some annoying resonances when I cut the filter that I was trying to cut out. They're still kind of present. You can hear it like in the intro more so. But without it in, so you hear them a lot more. So then just as it is over here. So you can hear a lot of those dark, annoying resonances that this is cutting out. And then I got some compression here using the CLA 76 by Waves here, the Bluey model. And got a ratio of 8 here. So you can really hear, it feels a lot more glued together. Some of those quieter sounds of that synth are being brought forward. And finally, we have TDR Nova here. Again, doing some more, trying to control those resonances, some multi-band compression here. The toms came out to play. So that's pretty much it the whole way through the whole song. You can see And then I'm just doing some automation here with the filter, opening and closing it over time, which I'll cover in a second. So that's kind of the main synth. And then during the choruses, this other synth comes in, which I'm also using. Synth Control's free Midnight preset pack, SERUM preset pack right here. Key Explorers 1. Actually, this is all delayed by 1. So Key Explorers 1. And so this sounds like so. Now, I'm thinking I probably adjusted this. I probably adjusted like the decay and the sustain in here, because I'm guessing it was probably pluckier. So it's almost kind of like a pad. Then I got this EQ here, again trying to cut out some of those resonances. Some more EQ here. This is a free EQ called Slick EQ, also by Tokyo Dawn Records. Turn this on. And so what are we doing here? We are cutting a bit at 638, so like right over here. And then we're boosting at about 8 over here by about 2. So we're going to plan on putting a high shelf in here. So we can hear this now with these 2 EQs in. So you can hear we're really cutting out that mud, just keeping that brightness in there. And then also a filter, because we're filtering this later on. Different portions here. Yeah. And pretty simple. And then we have this bell going on. And this is a bell I'm using from Syntronic 2, Curious Offspring, which I'm pretty sure is named after my children. They can get into a lot of things and make a lot of messes all the time. So I was inspired to use this. Again, we got a filter going on and controlling some of those really harsh sounds. It's kind of the tricky part with bells, is there can be some really harsh frequencies. Using another Slick EQ here. Here I'm boosting it around 5.7 here to kind of help it cut through. And then cutting some more of those lows around 700 over here, 750. So we'll hear the bell without anything in, and then with them in. Wait, do these have... Oh, these have buses. I forgot to cover those. Going back to the earlier synths, I also have a bus on here for reverb. So this is going to Valhalla Supermassive. This is another free synth. I'm using the Synth Wider preset. I don't remember if I may have tweaked these a little bit. Maybe the feedback a bit. So if we hear this now without the reverb, and then with it in, so that makes it really wide, because there's not really a whole lot of panning going on in this, because there's so kind of few elements, and it would sound weird to have something panned left. You don't have anything to counter it on the right. So instead there's lots of chorus, lots of widening with reverb and delay and stuff, so everything feels wide without a whole lot of panning. And so that same reverb is then being applied to this synth as well. And so kind of creates like a wall of sound kind of feel. So not quite as distinct maybe if something you like or not like. But that can create a really kind of a dreamy, synthy soundscape. Another thing that the Midnight likes to do is kind of this kind of pattern here, where it's kind of like bouncing between 2 notes, and then like the last end of the pattern, changing it up a little bit here. So that's what I did to create this pattern. And then again, back to those bells, those come in every so often. And I've got some reverb on this as well, using crystalline here to get really sparkly, shimmery, bright reverb. I've reviewed this plugin previously on the channel. All the baby audio plugins, I believe. Anyway, all the plugins and reviews and everything, that's all linked in the description. So we'll hear what the bell sounds like here. You can hear it trail off. It's really nice and shimmery. It looks, and then I'm just cutting the low end here. Probably not necessary. I think it's already doing it here with the dampening. And then finally, I'm using Diva here. Yeah, I'm using a preset here. I'm actually using the free version of Diva here that the Midnight actually uses, and some of their songs called Flaming June. And then adjusted the envelope here to bring, I think I brought the attack down and maybe the sustain down and the decay up or something. And then adjust the cutoff. Otherwise, everything else was the same. And it sounds like show. Yeah, just any of those harsh, offending frequencies, we just want to cut those out. And so then that's pretty much it for the synths. So those are all the synths I used. So it's kind of just one synth all the way through. Another synth comes in for the choruses and the bridge. And then like in the final, from the chorus, from the bridge to the ending chorus, there's another third synth that comes in. Then you have the bell intermittently playing. And so those are the keys. And then I didn't really have anything on the key bus here except a little bit of sidechain compression here that's linked to like the lead guitar here. Probably could put another one on here for like the vocals that just kind of ducks down in this range where the guitar was coming in, so help the guitar kind of cut through a little bit. So let's go to the guitar now, because it's not actually a guitar, because I can't actually play the guitar, as you could probably tell. And so I'm just using a synth here, a couple different synths by Syntronic here. Syntronic 2 Mediterranean saw lead, so kind of a good, if you want to create a synth that sounds like a guitar, using some kind of saw tooth waveform can be helpful. So this is what it sounds like, just the preset on its own. And it might have had some like reverb and delay on here. That would not sound good, having that being then having distortion added to it, so I add later like the guitar amp. So turn that off so it's completely dry. And then I wanted to layer it with something else, so I found this guitar like pulse lead. Also inside of Syntronic 2, and layered that in. So it has some kind of tube metal on it already, so it sounds a little bit more guitar-ish. The delay is on here, but I turned the wetness all the way down, so okay, basically turn that off. And something that is in common with these as well is the portamento, I believe, is turned on, because that makes it sound more like a guitar with, because with the guitar, right, when you're playing like, I mean, I'm not a guitar expert, but as you switch from note to note, sometimes you're like sliding and moving versus just abruptly stopping, starting a new note. Like you with like a keyboard. So like we can see portamento here is turned on slightly for a guitar like pulse lead, and over here I think bend is what's called over here is turned on. So, or glide right here, glide. So glide or portamento, you want to find a synth that does that and has a like a saw type waveform generally, or a pulse. And so that's kind of what I started with. And then how you play it is important too. So I kind of built this in 2 stages. I just played basically hitting random notes on my keyboard as I listened. And I ended up liking the second half, so I kept that, and then I replayed the first half to create this full guitar lead here. And so after I played it, then the next 2 very important parts are using your mod wheel and your pitch bend wheel on your MIDI keyboard if you have one. If you don't have one, you could try automating this in. So if I pull up automation here, pitch bend is what I started with. So you can see certain notes are being bent up. So that'd be like if you're playing the guitar and then you bend the string up to kind of create that sound. So you can see here. So then rather than just, it sounds like it's 2 notes, but it's 1 note and it's being bent up, versus if I were to cut this and move that note up, it wouldn't sound like a guitar. It would sound like a keyboard. And so you can see there's a lot of that going on, mostly going up here, some going down. And we also got the modulation wheel here. So it's like adding in like some vibrato, I believe. Or I guess that'd be like the tremolo or the whammy bar or something. I don't know, but they just sounds a little bit more like a guitar. And the last thing is like not having things perfect, right? It's like some of the notes are doubled up here, and that helps with the bending sound, or like having notes drop like really low. All right, so that is the dry here, and then I put effects over both of these. So starting off with a guitar amp, just used like the default preset here by the Waves guitar amp, just turned up the drive a little bit, I think. So it sounds a little more like a guitar now. Then I add some more saturation here, some tube saturation with the magma tubes here by Waves. Add some. It's definitely brought it up a bit, made it a bit brighter. Then we got some Tal Chorus. Again, it's a nice free awesome plugin that we use on the bass. Then EQ, pretty simple. Taking out some of those really high frequencies, because my understanding is with guitar, you don't typically have those super high frequencies. Then I add this simple delay here, just a 350 millisecond delay that has some high and low pass on it. But it still wasn't sounding like gritty enough, so I actually wanted to put, I really like using this CLA guitar, this re-amplify thing, to make it sound like a guitar, but it was a little bit too distorted, a little too ampy when I had it on the effect chain, so I instead used it, put it on a bus so I could kind of mix it in, so it's like parallel amplification guitar amp here. So with this in, and I also have this fuzz pedal on as well, but again, it was like too much being in the actual chain. So let's check out CLA guitar here. I got the fuzz box. So just trying to make it sound a little bit more guitarish, and then finally some reverb using Valhalla Supermassive again. The same synth wider bus that we use on our synths. So it sounds a little more dirty and gritty. And then another thing that the Midnight likes to do with their synth guitar leads, which now they're doing a lot more guitar and actually playing real guitar, but back in the day, Tim with the Midnight, he would just play a synth and then make it sound like a guitar. So they would like to create harmonies. That's what I did here, was I just took what my melody, here's what I played, and I just copied it down here, and then certain notes, usually the longer like held out notes, I just moved those down or up to make a harmony, and kind of kept the same pitch and modulation effects on, and had all the same effects here, so it sounds the same. So can only hear what this sounds like when you got these harmonies in here. So pretty cool, and that is what I did for guitar. And I had one other guitar part I played, no harmonies though, a little bit earlier, just to kind of give a little sneak peek of what was coming later during the guitar solo. So coming out of the verse, yeah, it's followed with the bells we're doing, I believe, these bells here. And then the last thing we got on here with the actual track are the effects here. Just using some uplifters, downlifters, and like splashes. Down sweep here so we can hear what these sound like. Pretty cool. And I just use that coming out of the verse, the intro into the verse, then out of the verse into the second chorus, then out of the guitar solo into the final chorus. Then I have some yaz in here as well, vocal yaz, but we'll cover that in a second. Because Midnight, they like to use those yaz. So yeah, so let's dive into the vocals now. And I use an experimental tool here, an AI tool called Lolals, and it lets you actually create vocals of a lot of different famous singers that you can use in your track. So you can see Lolals here. So you can see you can have Drake, Tate McRae, Ed Sheeran, Ariana Grande, Beyonce, and a whole lot more people sing on your track. So you just can record audio directly into Lolals, or you can upload a track that you recorded. So I sang this myself. And so I took this track and then I used Freddie Mercury and Lolals and dropped that in here. And so we can hear what Freddie Mercury now sing this. So you can hear it sounds pretty close to Freddie. Turn everything off here. All my effects. You can hear what he sounds like.
The Tesseract has been cracked, but tell me that the pact is intact.
So it's not perfect. You can hear there's quite a bit of artifacts. So I would probably want to spend more time trying to clean this up with like denoising tools like RX. By Isotope. Just real quick, I threw on just Clarity VX by Waves. I think that helped a bit.
The Tesseract has been cracked, but tell me that the pact is intact. I'm waiting for you in a dream, cotton bleeding from a moon beam.
So not awful, right? So especially with all the effects, you can't tell as much. So it kind of depends on what you're going for. But if you're not a singer and you want to get a voice real quick, you can throw this in here. Also, different voices sound better depending on the performance that you upload. So you kind of, I found like you kind of want to sound a little bit like the person that you're uploading. So like I also have like Rick Astley in here. And turn it into protoplasm. Yeah, definitely getting some of those artifacts. Also have Dua Lipa in here. Hear what she sounds like.
SERUM, am I really just in a case?
So, I mean, pretty good, right? Some phrases are better than others. Maybe if I sang it better, it would sound better. I also got The Weeknd in here.
Could all of this been a mirage? What I thought was hope, sabotage. Is this all just phantasm? Am I really just in a cast?
It's not bad. I ended up settling on Freddie Mercury, but yeah, we'll see. I'll probably end up re-recording this myself, try to do it a little better, but I thought that sounded pretty cool. It's a really awesome tool that, right, if you're not a vocalist and you want to get some decent sounding vocals in and just maybe clean them up a little bit, those artifacts, then you can get some really good sounding vocals and it sound like you have, you know, a big, you know, pop star or someone, a star from the past singing on your tracks, which is pretty cool because it sounds pretty realistic. It sounds like Freddie Mercury, it sounds like The Weeknd, sounds like Rick Astley. It's really going to be amazing to see what, you know, how AI progresses over the next few years. If you do want to try Lolals out, you can use my affiliate link. I have that in the description below, or go to orpheusaudioacademy.com/Lolals. Another thing I did with Lolals was create these Freddie Mercury yas, kind of like what the Midnight does sometimes. So again, I just sang myself saying yeah, and then I went into Lolals, found Freddie Mercury, so right here, and I just upload the track, wait for it to upload, give it a second, and now we can hear it.
Yeah.
And then you just click download, and then click these dots, and you click download.
Yeah.
And then that's how you got the track, and then you just drop it right into your project. So that's that. And then for these yeah effects, I gotta try to clean up some of those artifacts. Not sure how effective that was. EQ'd this hard, listening to that kind of the yas that the Midnight used. They were bright, but not didn't have brilliance. So I kind of tried to cut off those super highs while boosting this range here. Cut the low lows. I had some compression, delay. So I used some straight 16th, kind of like slapbacked a little bit to kind of get a shimmery type of delay. And I also add the same delay that I had on the guitars. And then I bust it to some room reverb, and then my more shimmery towel reverb here, which is really cool. So altogether, it sounds like so. So you can hear it kind of like wavering back and forth with that 16th note delay. And then it's the guitar delay that kind of, you actually hear the echo. So it's more of an echo. So if we turn this off, you can hear the shimmering. And now let's look at the actual main vocals here. So we'll look at, I guess we'll look at what I threw on myself, since this is probably more accurate representation. So what I actually sang here. So I use the CLA guitar because I've seen the Midnight use this. Just for the compression here. Just a straight up compression, not using anything else. Then I think this is something I did myself. I added some saturation to this. Just some warm tube saturation to liven up the vocal. The Tesseract has been cracked, but tell me that the pact is intact. So it kind of brightens it up a bit too and pulls it forward. The Tesseract has been cracked, but tell me that the pact is intact. I'm waiting for you in a... And then some EQ here, bringing up kind of the main part of the vocal here, brightness, and then cutting some of the lows. The Tesseract has been cracked, but tell me that the pact is intact. So you can hear it really thins it out. Maybe on its own it doesn't sound as good, but when you have all the dense track going on, you don't really need those lows, and the vocal can get a little lost and sound a little muddy. So then we got some more slick EQ on here, and we're also cutting some more of those low mids, bass frequencies. The Tesseract has been cracked, and then some multi-band compression here. So again, we're taking out more of those low mids and some of the harsher frequencies up here. So that's the nice thing about this is, like, you don't want to just statically cut out those highs because you might want those at certain points, but if it gets too bright, then when it crosses that threshold, the compressor will kick in. The Tesseract has been cracked, but tell me that the pact. Then we got some more compression here. The Tesseract has been cracked, but tell me that the pact. Definitely helps bring the full vocal together, kind of glues it together, pulls it forward. And then we got some delay here, just straight quarter note delay. And I really like the comeback kid delay here because you can add in a lot of grit, like saturation, tape saturation, distortion, and so on. You can high and low cut it, make it wider. And I am using ping pong delay as well. And it also has a ducker. So I'm using the ducker, turn the ducker up so that when the dry vocal is in, it's going to be ducking the delay. So the delay is not going to be masking and covering up the actual dry.
The tesseract has been cracked, but tell me that the pact is intact. I'm waiting for you in a dream.
So I might want to reduce the feedback here.
Is intact. I'm waiting for you in a dream.
So that's pretty cool. And then I got some room reverb. This is kind of nice, but everything in a room of some kind. Here I'm using the classic studio reverb, real ambience here by IQ Multimedia.
The tesseract has been cracked, but tell me that the pact.
So now it just makes it feel like it's more in a realistic space. And now I am sending it to the same shimmery crystalline reverb that we used on our bells, I believe.
The tesseract has been cracked, but tell me that the pact is intact.
It's nice and bright and it feels big, which is what you have like in the 80s and Synthwave. But I also got some pre-delay on here so that it's not getting covered up either. The delay starting a little bit, or the reverb starting a little bit delayed. And so you can hear that tail and that shimmer coming off of it. And then I am automating this, that long, high held out note. It's kind of like fading into the background kind of sound here.
The tesseract bleeding from a moonbeam.
So now let's hear it all together.
The tesseract has been cracked, but tell me that the pact is intact. I'm waiting for you in a dream, cut and bleeding from a moonbeam. Where's the astral mage when I need him? I'm turning into protoplasm. All I have is midnight hope, a midnight hope.
So that's kind of the main track, but now let's look at the arrangement a little bit here, because this is a big part of what goes into the Midnight, Songs by the Midnight, and just Synthwave in general. So first off, right, you can see we have a really long intro here, so maybe you don't want to have that. This is a longer song. So maybe you want to cut the intro down by half or even by like 3/4. We got like a double verse here. Then we have like a half chorus, then a regular verse, then a double chorus or a full chorus. Then you got a bridge. So that's another thing. Maybe you want to cut this bridge, because you can have 2 bridges here in this song, because I was kind of following the song structure for the Comeback Kid. And then you have the guitar solo. So right, this could just be one section here. You can take out the bridge and just have the guitar solo. Then you got the final chorus and then an outro. So this is a pretty longer, more cinematic, dreamy kind of midnight song. But then a big thing is with automation here. So if you look at the automation going on, so with the bass here, so you can see the bass, it is being high cut, and then you hear the bass opening up. Then we get to the verse, it drops back down, and then you see it peaks during the choruses here. Verses, it drops back down, so you're like cutting out all the higher frequencies so the vocal stands out, but then you get full energy during the choruses. In the bridge here, it kind of tails off and then picks back up and then tails off at the end. With the bass, you also want to low cut if you're going to be high cutting, so you just have those low frequencies. When you have like just the bass going on and maybe other stuff that's high cut, it can get really rumbly and really distorted right when you have the compression and the limiters bring up all the volume all the way up. It can sound really rumbly and distorted. So if you're going to be like high cutting a lot, cutting all those high frequencies, which I guess I'd be from this direction on YouTube, you want to also cut the low frequencies. So you can see that's what I'm doing here. So this macro 4 is cutting the low lows. So as the high is cut, so both highs and lows are being cut. And then as it opens up, both are opening up respectively. And so that it's then full blast, full frequency range during the choruses, and then it's over the course of the song, it's fluctuating. And the same thing is going on with the synths here. So you can see this main synth that goes all the way through. It's being cut and opened up over time. So we can hear that here in the intro. So you can hear it now, right? It peaks and then it drops back down. And then here when the vocals drop out, right? You don't typically want to have nothing happen when your vocals drop out. You want to have a lead come in, which kind of happens here with the bells, or something else moves. So something else take the place of that melody when it drops out, that lead when it drops out. So in this case, we kind of have the filter open up a bit. So it's like, woo, and it goes back down and continues its overall gradual increase here. So we can hear that here.
Waiting for the albatross.
There's the bells.
Could all of this been?
And then the vocals come back in, and now the synth takes a step back. So that's what you want to have, this movement going on. Something steps forward, something steps back. And so we got the same thing with all these synths. This bridge section here, everything kind of drops out. And as everything's building up, then the guitar comes in, the guitar solo. And lastly, you have the outro where everything then gets high cut again. Now, I covered a ton of stuff in this video, but I had to go kind of fast, so there's a lot I couldn't cover. So if you want my complete step-by-step system for creating professional synthwave tracks from home, then be sure to check out my course, Synthwave Mastery. You can see it here. Inside this course, not only will you find a complete step-by-step end-to-end system that shows you how to create masterful synthwave productions, even if you're a beginner with budget equipment, but this also includes a supportive community, which I'll talk about in a second. But this will finally give you the confidence to consistently finish amazing synthwave music that you're proud of and that you love listening to, and that stacks up with your favorite artists. When you sign up for Synthwave Mastery, you'll be taken to the course, which looks like this. You can see all the lessons here. Module 1 is all about sound design and selection, how to choose the right sounds and how to design your own synthwave sound. Then in Module 2, we get into how to write a synthwave song, and I actually write a song from start to finish. You can see my writing process here as well in Module 2, so you get everything you need to know on how to write amazing synthwave songs. And then we get to Module 3, where we cover mixing, including specific mixing tips for synthwave music and even how to master your music. And then finally, there's some awesome bonuses as well. For example, discount codes on amazing plugins for creating synthwave music. You also get royalty-free synthwave loops and samples, and also just cool ideas for your music and additional training as well. So this is everything you need to start producing professional quality synthwave music from home. So if you want to check this out or just learn more about this course, go to orpheusaudioacademy.com/synthwave, and I'll also have a link to this in the description below. With that, have an awesome day and keep creating.